This puppet show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's gone, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with lies and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
I know the truth is hard to swallow, just digest it. Suspected something's going on. Chosen, just neglected. Deflected by some breaking news. Are we just accepted? Expected just to fall in line and follow their perspective. Don't question their objectives, but I got a lot of questions. How these kids molested, but nobody's been arrested. Read it in the Testament. These children are protected. So I'm fighting all these terrorists, both foreign and domestic.
Do you have anything specific? I kind of would like to talk more about churches, not Mormon church in particular, but just kind of what you've seen and, you know, how the 501c3, I mean, to me, that's one of the things that always I had a question about that made it easy for me once I was willing to spend the time and do a little research that, you know, if you're getting, obviously I was coming from the Mormon side mostly, but I then started looking at how are these, you know, mega pastors and these mega churches all taking place and, you know, the tax-free and all this crap. It's like, if you're in that situation, you're answering to somebody, you know, at least that's what I believed. And that's what's turned out to be the case from what I've seen.
Yes. Well, and I think so many of the churches really have, without question, they've got a bias that makes it very, very difficult for them to be able to have consistency with convictions in a lot of ways, you know. And man, I've been to many different churches, you know, and like your background obviously coming from the Mormon church gives you a very different lens in some ways, but still there's a similar flavor to which pastors are incentivized from their congregation and from tax breaks and the tithe plate to speak in a very specific type of way. And it's very difficult to avoid that trap. You know, it's very difficult to avoid that. And it's the system is designed almost against somebody's convictions. It really is. It rewards people that are willing to kind of go along with that system. And for the people that go to a church, donating to a 501c3 is incentivized tremendously because it's like a way of giving contributions. It's a way of laundering money in a sense. It really is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, I mean, King David has this moment where he's like, he has the biggest screw up of his entire life was not the Bathsheba moment. You know, it was at the very end of his life when he counts and numbers all of the troops of Israel. And it's like, he gets a choice between 3 years of famine, 3 months of running from his enemies, or 3 days of plague. And he's like, well, I'd rather fall into the hands of Yahuwah because he'll be merciful with me. And so this plague breaks out, and the angel of Yahuwah comes to Jerusalem to start killing people. And it's like 70,000 people are dead already, you know, and the angel is standing there with a sword drawn, destroying angel, and he's standing over Mount Moriah. And there's this guy who has a threshing floor there, and that's literally where he's standing. And David goes to buy the floor and do an offering there. And the man tries to give it to him for free. And he says, I will never bring an offering without sacrifice. It should be costly, you know? And it's always one of those things that bothered me throughout my life was seeing the way that charitable donations towards the church are just turned around as tax breaks later on, you know? And that's not exactly the same thing as just a true offering, you know, is a true, like giving a first of your best, you know, like a lot of people aren't agriculturally based. So tithing and giving of your first fruits of whatever it is that you produce, yielded, improved, is very, very different and very foreign to us, you know? And so those were always those little things that kind of stuck out at me. But growing up, seeing a lot on one side, my mom's side is really devout Roman Catholics, very devout. And they were always plugged into that system. And the version that I got to experience of what Catholicism was and the structured form of almost an intelligence gathering operation that it really facilitated was the core tenet to what I saw inside that version of churchianity, you know, was a controller relationship where there was insulations. There was protection and compartmentalization between infrastructure of people that were in the know and those were outside of the know. And then but on my father's side, we were really more raised in non-denominational Christianity, or in the early years, it was very much more like, I guess you would say, like charismatic churches,
Okay.
lots of the kind of Holy Spirit stuff,
Yeah.
signs and wonders, a bit more like that. But there in that movement and those sides of churches, I saw a lot more boldness. I did see a lot more like people that were willing to preach a very salty gospel and weren't as much buffering the truth. But at the same time, I didn't still see them weighing into the very meaty topics, the very dangerous topics, that
Mhm.
could get them in trouble.
Right.
And as we went along and my family would move towns, move cities, we would go to different churches until we were in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And we ended up going to what was the largest church in Colorado. It was called New Life Church. And that was a mega church. That was my first experience at, this is where they have the International House of Prayer there. I mean, it's a campus,
Wow.
when you show up there, there's thousands and thousands of people rolling through there every Sunday, multiple time slots, like a full production,
Wow.
where huge arena, that you
Yeah.
walk into, massive sound stage, studio, lighting, like a concert every single week. And to see that version of it to where money was flowing through at a totally different kind of basis. And so the facilitators of that gave very structured messages.
Oh,
It was a
yeah.
very different type of approach to teaching and preaching than what I saw in those smaller sized churches. And in there, even less boldness, even less willingness to call people out on their sins and their convictions. And ultimately, the pastor that was the president of the American Evangelical Society, or the Evangelical Association, the largest representation of Christians. And he was in a homosexual relationship. He had a drug dealer, and it turned into this huge, horrific scandal. And to this day, he's still active. Ted Haggard is his name. And he's still a front line on that whole leading edge of turning the church away from biblical definitions towards marriage. And I mean, he has completely gone a very, very different direction. And for a lot of people, I think this is a way of shattering their faith, is
Oh, yeah.
destabilizing them, is seeing people that they respect and they connect with the creator going through these absolute downfalls and these absolute tragedies. But the version of churchianity is so complicated. It
Isn't it
really is.
though?
And I think
Yeah.
it's really by design to keep us from the truth in so many ways, and an authentic relationship with our creator through his word.
100%. Because I've, just this last week before this, the Mormon church came out and they just hired a new guy over, I think it's their marketing, but it's a big position. And, he's doing all these posts and his profiles all show the pronouns, this and that. And,
Mm.
it's like, it's been so interesting and so baffling to me that the true believers of the gospel of Jesus Christ, if to me, the simplest way to answer a question that you might have, I've always just said, well, what would Jesus do? I'm talking Jesus of the Bible, not the Book of Mormon. Um, and last week went with my wife on a Thursday late afternoon. She had to return some things from Christmas to a mall in Salt Lake City that the church built. It's called City Creek. It's like a $1.3 billion facility, mall. And as I'm walking through there, and I've been through it many times and had these thoughts before, but it just hit me. It's like, what would Jesus do? And I'm looking around and it's everything worldly. It's Victoria's Secrets. And you know what I mean? It's like, how can these people that believe in this church justify in their minds, yet so many do it, that is okay? It just
Mm.
doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. But yet so many just go along with it and really don't question it. And it's just, I think that happens, regardless of the church. Um, but yeah, like it's just been interesting, and it's just so to me it's so simple now, but because I was there before, um, and I did, I guess at times just kind of blow things off, but I guess if I'm being honest too, I was never a real totally in type member either, you know. But it's one of those things that it's like Why do we believe that we need a middleman between us and the
Mm,
Savior?
mm,
I just don't believe we do. And it's that one-to-one relationship that matters,
mhm.
and I've had way more, I guess what you'd call spiritual experiences outside of any church building I've been in. I'm not saying I haven't had them in those. I have, but that doesn't mean it's about the church.
Right. This is, I think you hit it dead on the head. That so much of what you're seeing there is just it's a carryover to the Roman Catholic traditions. It really is. It is the form of intermediaries between us and our Creator that have been sewn in there. Like the doctrines of the Counter-Reformation movement, that was really pioneered by Ignatius Loyola and the Jesuits. Like they were put on a cloak and then infiltrate. That was their whole ideological pursuit, was to go ahead and join the opponent and then move their way in and then change it from within. Incrementalism. It's like a
Yeah.
Fabian socialist war. It's like slowly steer the ship back towards the mother church. That was their agenda. And in so much of what we saw in Protestantism, they didn't protest enough. They didn't truly divorce and separate themselves in totality from those ideological pursuits. And you see that through like the American Bible Society, and you see that through the seminaries where that infiltration steeped itself into the seminaries to where doctrinally they moved them back in that same direction, to where then it was like the incentivization became well, in order to be a pastor in this church, you're going to have to go through the seminary. You're going to have to go ahead and get these certifications. And in today's modern version, it's like you need a business degree more often than
Yeah.
not in its own way, because it's a franchise churchianity. That's
Yeah.
the format with which they've adopted. Like the church that I started going to, the place where I actually ended up meeting my wife, like it was called Flatirons Community Church. And at the time they were a very fast growing church, and they were met in like a renovated strip mall,
Uh-huh.
and it had one of the fastest growing college ministries in the entire United States. And their whole approach was very much this, like, it's an okay place to not be okay. And it was a place where it was like, well, you got sin in your life, brother, me too. And it's like we just want to create an environment where it's a safe place to bump into Jesus. That was their kind of slogan. That was their rhetoric, and everything about it. You don't even realize it, I think, as you start into this process, but you just it's so enticing, and their marketing strategy was tell other people about Flatirons. That was like their thing. Tell them about Flatirons. Do you go to Flatirons? You should come with me to Flatirons. Like the branding behind it was paramount, and this is, you'll see this. Churches today are focused on branding, image, public relations, and then how to get their brand location. And I got like my way into leadership there and became like very intermixed and locked in step with that, because to me, I thought this is the greatest thing I'd ever been a part of.
Yeah.
The energy, the excitement, it's like it's a very real effect, and you'll start to see some good fruit in your life and the lives of others.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, as time went on and I got to be more and more part of the leadership, to where I'm like volunteering 40, 50, 60 hours a week, you start to realize, like, I wanted to be a pastor there, and their care pastor, and like I wanted to be an intermediary between their college ministry and their their mental health and their trauma ministry. Like that was really where I had this passion for. And the more I got behind it, they started an internship program so that they could have people go raise money and then get paid by, about basically like $9 an hour, so that you can
Wow.
work for them 60 hours a week, and it was like, you got to go raise your own money. Meanwhile, millions of dollars were flowing through the church. And
Yeah.
as they ended up making this deal with the city of Lafayette, Colorado, because they couldn't find a building. They couldn't afford to build the next big building project that
Yeah.
they had to do. Like most people, anybody that's gone to a big church or a church that grows really quickly, you understand this is literally like the culture that you become immersed with, is like, we gotta get a bigger building because we're growing so much. Whereas like when you look at the framework of what the scriptures outlined, when churches get when like the church, the ecclesia got large, they divided. They started somewhere else, and they that was the growth model that was very effective. Is they broke bread in one another's houses. That was literally the most effective model that they had, because at the end of the day, like, eh, at the end of the day, we've gone to so many different churches and fellowships and associations over the years, and I have seen some of the most deplorable, horrible things taking place inside churches and
Oh,
inside fellowships. I mean, of all different degrees, man. I could talk forever about it because we went through a heinous version of that this last year that was just disgusting and utterly the worst stuff, man. People covering up child sexual crimes. You know what I'm saying? Like
oh, dude,
people
yeah.
that are awake to all these topics who know better.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Still doing the same kind of crap because
Yeah.
branding because their brand gets associated with this, because their ministry name gets associated with it. And it's like, well, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier basically to just not talk about it and compartmentalize all
Yeah.
the information. Oh, it just, dude, it's so frustrating stuff that pissed me off like crazy. But back at Flatirons, they couldn't raise enough money. And so eventually they worked out a deal with the state and the state or the city. And they were like, hey, we like your business that your church brings us so much. Like, we'll finance you this building, this huge metroplex of
Jeez.
like what was a Kmart or Super Walmart kind of building. And
Yeah.
we're like, we'll give this to you, you know? And you're like, what was the real deal behind the scenes? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because then it was like millions. They went from, a couple $1 million to being like $20 million flowing through that place. And it became the money
Jeez.
laundering facilitation. And I mean, they put in the most advanced sound system in there. So that was like a concert. They played a secular song to start every single worship set, like it became like this totally different version of churchianity so quickly. And it was just, we got to see it get steered further and further and further away from the set apart gospel. And we watched them avoid all the topics of politics. We watched them politically sanitize themselves.
Yep.
And it was just this, it was a death of an idol for a lot of us that had been a part of it
Yeah.
because we realized we're like, they're not actually pointing people towards the gospel of the kingdom. Like they're pointing them towards the
Bingo.
church. They're pointing them towards the
That's it.
brand and the
That's it.
logo that's what we're supposed to have. Like put these logos on your car so that everybody can see, oh, there's somebody else that goes to Flatiron. It's like
Yeah.
great.
That's what's
You know,
ironic too, is we're driving back from Salt Lake last week. And once again, I've seen this again, but for some reason that last Thursday night, this stuff was just coming at me just clear and just hard. Driving from Salt Lake City back to Utah County down I-15, all the temples, and there's probably five,
mm,
going up, there's a few sitting up, and they all stand out. Literally down the hill from my house, literally 5 blocks, brand new one being built, stands
mm,
up high. And again, I just said, what Jesus do? Like, he's not going to be standing up saying, look at us, look at me, you
mm,
know. But that's what they continue to do. And I think, most churches, and or I shouldn't say that, I guess, but so many leadership throughout the churches really showed their true colors when COVID hit, and
mm,
how they chose to do what they did, whether
mm,
that's encouraging the jab, you know, bioweapon, or what. Very few stood up, you know, and to me that was very telling.
mm. You're absolutely right. And there was at Flatirons, there was this really because we didn't really see what was going on at some levels behind the scenes. But I started hearing all these people, like the pastor started making this big advocacy for this thing that was called the crucible. And oh, was that the crucible? Hold on a second. Oh man. That may not be the exact name of it, or that's what they called it. Anyways, it was this you don't talk about what happens there. It was like this men's retreat, and he kept talking about these therapeutic breakthroughs of what was happening there and the people that like came out of it and how there was this transformational power that was happening when you go there. And it was like, but it was surrounded by this like mentality that you're not allowed to talk about anything that happened there. And I was like, this is super red flag stuff. You know what I'm saying? And we were like, what is this that's going on here? And it started with a few of the associate pastors and then they finally got the main pastor, this guy whose name was Jim Bergen, to be all about it. And he ended up going there and he said that after he came out of it, I mean, he came out and got these tattoos of a dragon getting ripped open and this like man getting pulled out of it, and he was like, it's
Really?
this core tenet. It's a lot of Jungian, Carl Jung based like shadow work and like psychology. Carl Jung was an occultist in it through and
Uh,
through. And so it's a different form of an esoteric society that's adopting occult tactics, but they're mixing it like paganism being mixed in with Christian psychology. And anyways, all of my friends at the time, because a lot of them became interns and didn't become staff there. And I ended up not doing that. And at the same time, this was right at the crux of when I was waking up to so many of these issues and what was going on with myself. And I had them start coming to me and being like, man, I will pay for you to go. I will pay for you to go. And I was like, man, I'm not going anywhere until somebody sits down and explains to me exactly what happens when you go to this. Like, I
Yeah.
need you to explain to me what's actually happening there. And none of them would. They're all like, no, man, they really are like serious that you're not supposed to talk about what happens there. I'm like, this is like Fight Club. What the heck is your guys' deal? A bunch of Freemasonic stuff? And he's like, finally, I had like one of my mentors, a guy who like who was early on at the church and was like had poured into me and like spiritually mentored me for years. He
Uh-huh.
got up and had coffee with me and was like, man, I just want to talk to you. And he's like, you got to go. You got to go to this and I'll pay for you to go. And I was like, I'm not going unless someone tells me. And so finally he's like, all right, I'll tell you, but you can't tell anyone. I'm like, yeah, right, dude. I'm gonna tell every single person I know because I know there's a freak show stuff coming. But he was like, okay, well, you show up, you pull up at night, and everything's dark, and they start lighting candles along the path. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man. He's like, they like will put you in a hood, you know,
Oh,
and they lead you into a room and they whisper a name into your ear, like give you a new name, like an
dude.
animal name. Kid you not, man. And like they start taking you in, give you this new identity. They like divide your association with your former self, and you're supposed to come in and like they will bring you into this room, right, with these other people. You're not supposed to use your normal names. You're supposed to have kind of this like reservation, this quietness about yourself. And then they literally do like shadow work on the mat. Like one of my friends who was like had an abortion, he's like, you're gonna go in and take this baby doll and grab it and you're gonna stab it and kill it in front of everyone and do all
No
this stuff,
way.
like mock killing of this baby and be like, this is what you did, in front of everyone. And I was like, this is just like textbook secret society ways of trauma-based mind control for people, and this is literally what the fruit of this organization was. Well, once I was like, dude, I'm not touching this 10-foot pole. Like, this is crazy. You guys are getting into soul contracts with a secret society and you don't even know it. But the church, what happened is the pastors that were like really still trying to be true to the form, the ones that had been carrying over when they were still kind of growing, that were like lingering on, all of them, if they didn't go through this crucible stuff, dude, they were kicked out. It's like one by one by
Really?
one by one until that's how they systematically took over this entire organization. And I mean, they gutted it. They
Wow.
gutted the place. And it was just it was an infiltration from within until they ultimately
Yep.
started like a school for this. I mean, they are like the brand PR people that were repping this like crazy at the time. And it was just like, it was a little dichotomy of, I think, what happens behind the scenes at a lot of these churches that most people don't see.
Oh
They don't
yeah.
understand why it is that they start to compromise. Where is that compromise set in?
Yeah.
And this is the question each and every one of us has to wrestle with. And when we identify it, it's like we have a choice to make, either to get as far away from that as possible and to understand that the church is not a building where we go to, that we are
Yeah.
called to be the set apart assembly. Like, this was literally started in the days of Moses, like people that have been called out of the wilderness of the nations, people that have been called out of the ways of wickedness and out of the world. You are part of his body. You're part of his believers that were gathered together. Like, we were supposed to gather together and follow him and be a set apart people. And we're supposed to be known by the signs and the wonders and the miracles that we do in his name. We're supposed to walk in his authority and set captives free and bind demons and set the oppressed, loosen those chains of oppression that are on the necks of the people. Like, that's part of the church, like we didn't
So
see that
true.
ever on a large scale. We really didn't. As
Yeah.
soon as it got beyond almost house church sizes, I've still yet to see it where there's not funkiness. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's
Yeah.
such a perversion that can slip in, because the truth is that's the enemy is always wanting to infiltrate there. The enemy
Yeah.
is always trying to look for a door into that place to destroy it from within.
What how much do you know about Freemasonry and like Skull and Bones? The reason I asked, particularly about Skull and Bones, but well, both, is because as you're talking about some of the things you just mentioned, when you go through the Mormon temple, I don't know how much you probably know some of this, I'm sure.
Mm,
You get a new name that's whispered to you and that you can never tell, And as you're going through and the different giddy up that they have you put on and things, it's an apron that's very similar, like a Masonic apron, basically. It's
mm,
supposed to symbolize,
you bet.
basically leaves, as if you're covering yourself in the Garden of Eden. But that there's so much there. And then some of the signs and penalties if you don't live your covenants that you make are just, it's like Masonic stuff.
Will
They've
you
changed
explain
it.
that more?
Yeah, and they've
Explain more of
changed
what
it.
that's like.
Yeah, so when I got my endowments out, okay, when you go through the temple, usually it's before you go on a mission. If it's a female, usually it's typically before she's getting married, or if she goes on a mission. So then you get your garments, right? Your sacred underwear. And when you go through and make these covenants, you're doing signs and tokens. Some of the handshakes are exactly like you see a lot of these. I mean, I've seen plenty of pictures of past Mormon presidents. They call them prophets. I call them presidents because they're presidents of a corporation, simply nothing more. Shaking hands with presidents, popes. It's the secret handshake, where they've got the finger extended down the wrist. It's masonry basically. And um, but as you make those signs, so certain parts of this ceremony that used to last close to 2 hours, I think it's now closer to an hour. And it's a thing, even that alone, if you truly believed it from the get-go when you went, um, to today, it's continued to change and evolve. If it's
Hmm.
truly God's word, it doesn't change. That's another thing to me that's just common sense to me. Maybe not to everybody, but I think that's just pretty common, to look at things that way. If you truly believe in God, do you think that He's going to put something out that's wrong the first time? I just
That's
don't
right.
believe that. You know. Anyway, and so the signs and tokens, and then the penalties, that has changed. When I went
Hmm.
through, it changed, I believe, a year or two after I went through, and I went through, I believe, in '86. But it used to be, if you, and I can't tell you exactly what the covenant was, and then the penalty associated with the specific covenant. But some of them were to do with adultery, and you only have sexual relations with your wife, things like that. But it used to be, you would slit your throat from ear to ear, and it used to be you'd disembowel yourself.
Wow.
And dude, as I look back on that, and you never talked about this stuff, by the way, to
Hmm.
anybody
Hmm.
outside of the temple. So as young, basically kids, most people that are, 18, 19 going on missions, they're still kids in a sense, and they don't have any idea what they're going into. And boom, then that's what they deal with. And very few even think twice, honestly. I just
Hmm.
went through the motions. I wasn't really thinking about it, but as I've gotten older and looked at that, it's like, what in the hell? How
Hmm.
did that just seem okay? You know, it's just wrong. And then so there's a lot of masonry involved. I mean, Joseph Smith, who set those things up through, you know, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, um, God, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but anyway, he, sets that up, but he was a Freemason, you know,
Hmm.
and that all supposedly came from, you know, the Savior on what to do and how to do it. But there's so many ties right to Freemasonry. There's so many similarities, but then the current president in his autobiography flat out talks about in almost a gloating way how he was I think it was at Yale where he was going to school and was involved, got into Skull and Bones, and then the Allen
Wow.
Key, you know. And so talk about infiltration within. I mean, I think it happened way before that, and I'm not even convinced that Joseph Smith, was a true restorer of anything. Because I mean, when did, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of anywhere in Scripture that I'm aware of anyway where Christ had organized religion, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So yeah,
You know,
so that right there tells
not
me a
in
whole
that sense.
bunch.
Now the format that the Messiah followed was expressly written through the instructions of the Torah, the loving instruction of Yahuwah.
That's
Like
right.
when you read it, that's the form of structure that was given to mankind to govern society.
Yeah.
These were their laws for their benefit, not this version of religion that has been systematized and mystified. What you're talking about is the mystery religions. This is
Oh,
Babylonian mystery
absolutely.
religion. This is Egyptian sex magic that you're describing. You know, that's like exactly the same things where they're making you put on the outfit. They're making, I mean, they're stripping you down, your former identity, and they're literally making you dehumanized to who you were and giving you your new identity as you enter into a covenant with a different mighty one. You
Yeah,
know,
and you know
that's
what
why
they
they
do?
swear those enforcing oaths.
Yeah, you know what they do before you go into the endowment session is what it's called. If you've never been, so your first time before you get that garment,
Is this in a temple? Just
it's in a
imagine nobody's
temple.
ever heard this in their life.
Oh
Because there's a
yeah,
lot of
it's in.
people who are like, I'll share this with who have
Yeah.
no idea what it's like to go through this experience. You know, most people have literally never walked into a Mormon building, let alone the temple, you
This
know?
next part will blow you away probably more than the endowment portion with the signs and penalties. So when you're going through the first time to get your endowment to put on your sacred garments, and the thing that's interesting, those sacred garments, they have different sewn in things over the breast, the navel, and then above the knees. Okay. And if you really look at them, it actually is almost like the Masonic symbol of these two if you just put them together. It's crazy. So when you go through the very first time, the first thing you do before you go into that endowment session, before you get the garments to put on, because you have to take some with you, because now you're putting those things on, is there's what's called a washing and anointing. And when I went through, it's changed now again, but dude, you would be giving literally a sheet that your head went through and it covered you from the front and the back, nothing fully exposed on the sides. And you go through and say their little thing and basically, touch you. They don't touch you in the private areas, but damn close to do your washing and anointing. And it's
This
just
is other
crazy.
men. Other men
Yes. And
are there
women,
with
yes.
you,
Yes.
and they're now touching your
Just
body and washing you.
you and one man in a little, I don't know what you'd call it, little, area that has curtains. And you're sitting down there standing, they read their little lines. Most of them have it memorized at that point, and they go through it and then touch you, can't even think exactly where, but I mean, it's not your genitals or anything like that, but it's still inappropriate as hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're just rubbing you one or two different areas with this oil and or water, and that's it. It's kind of messed up. It's really
And
messed
then
up.
and then where do you go next?
And then, they leave, you walk in, and then you go change, put your garments on, put your white pants, your white shirt on, and then you go into a waiting area. um, I guess they call it kind of like a chapel. Someone's playing the piano, and there's the Book of Mormon in there. The people are sitting there reading, or people can just sit there and meditate or pray if they want. And then when it's time for that session to start, everyone gets up and goes into an endowment room, which is just another kind of like a small movie theater, if you will. It's just got movie theater type seats, not today's type, but um, and somebody in the front, and most of them are a movie that follows along. It starts with heaven and earth, being made in 7 days and whatnot. And then there's somebody officiating, a man officiating, a man and his wife, but the man's doing everything, of course. And certain times of the movie, Salt Lake Temple, I still believe, does a live session. So there's actors acting it instead of the movie. And that movie's changed many times over the last
Mm.
10 to 15 years. It's shortened way down. Um, and let's see, and so it'll be paused, and then you'll go through some of those specific situations, to someone, they'll do one of the type secret handshakes that's representing, for example, the sign of the nail in the Savior's hand. And that officiator will go through all the men's rows, come, to make sure you understand it, and you do the handshake. The woman, his wife, will do it with all the women. You're always on the other side too. You're never sitting with your spouse, or if you're
Mm.
not married, of course, then you wouldn't. But if you're married, you're still men on one side, women on the other. And it's just very odd, And the stuff you wear, is weird. You have the apron, and then there's, I don't even know what you'd call it, but it's set on one shoulder, and it's, you know, I don't know what you'd call it.
Like a sash?
There is a sash, and you put that
Mm.
on, and then you go through some things, and and changed it halfway through, and then you change where that other thing, it's like covering your front and back. I mean, of course, your clothes are on all that, and you have to take the apron off, and then you put the apron back on top, and so you're switching from one side to the other as you're going through. And then, once you're all finished with everything and it's done, then you basically go to what is called a veil. And, you have this little mount that knocks 3 times, and someone on the other side is supposedly acting, like God, and, came to converse with you at the veil. And then you say certain little things to get through. It's freaking crazy now that I just really have looked at it.
Yeah.
It's
Man.
it's nuts.
See, but it's something that there's a reason they want to keep that secret, you know? It's like
Absolutely.
there's a reason they don't want to tell you at
Yeah,
the entrance point
no
when you're like,
doubt.
this is the form of cults.
Yeah,
You
you
know, it's
can
like
100%. You can find
I
it now on YouTube. If you go and put in like LDS endowment, some people have, snuck in and
well
filmed it.
done. Well
So you'll be
done.
able to see the clothing I'm talking about. I'll put that in the show notes for everybody listening that's curious. I'll find that video and put it in the show notes because it's all, I mean, it's 100% absolutely cult, period, end of story. I mean, you cannot argue it if you could open your mind. If you're not Mormon, you can see it so simply. But if you're a true believing member still, you know, unless you're just not willing to even look, which they train you not to do,
Yep.
it's so easy to see, you know. And then to see people justifying all the gaslighting that's done and, justifying their positions changing and so many things. And dude, they're so aligned with the UN. It's ridiculous. They're they have a manual for the youth. I think it's the women's side, but the manual color scheme was exactly like the UN's color scheme. Exactly. I mean, they meet with people at the UN. They speak at those big United Nations
Mhm.
things. The top leadership. I mean, they're in total lockstep with it. They're redesigning the temple grounds in Salt Lake City. All the flags are going to be there. I
Jeez.
mean, it's just mind blowing that people don't see it. And I live right here with everybody. I
Hmm.
heard recently because Utah obviously had a massive LDS population, but I've heard it's flipped to where it's not quite the majority anymore, which is that
Wow.
says a ton. They're losing members like faster than they're baptized, I think, nowadays.
Wow. And that's that structure of how cults form. There's people think that somebody signs up for a cult, but
Yeah.
the vast majority of times you do not
Right.
know that you're in anything associated with a cult for a good long time. And this is what's so seductive about it. It's got its own power behind it because this is that veils within veils. This is an onion approach, to where
Yes.
the outer members that are first coming in and having that encounter are not seeing or being told about any aspect of it that's freaky, that's
Yep.
weird, and it's a slow grooming process, just like how
Yeah.
predators groom children to
Yeah.
abuse them. It's the same methodologies that are utilized, but these are the corporatized versions of it, like you're describing on a whole scale, societal scale, to
Yeah.
where that wool is placed so firmly over the eyes so that people are only seeing a version of it. Like Mormonism out in Arizona, and well, more so in Colorado. I had some like interactions more with Mormons later on in my life when I was older. And the version that was represented was very churchianity like. It was
Mhm.
very much assuaded to be like, this is the true Bible. Like we have the true Bible. I'd have them like come up to my ears and whisper these things to me, like, "Oh, that Bible's good, but
The
there's
one
a
true
true Bible
church.
before it got corrupted.
Yeah.
We have that. And it was like it was a hook of like mystique and this like we have access to information, secret information that you
Yes.
want, and it's like that's the hook that they're trying to get you in. And I'm like, you ever hear about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? That was the secret information.
That's
It's
right.
like this is the same lie that have been getting people for a long time. And even just, man, to hear you just explain that is incredible because when I had to film, set up cameras of people going through initiation ceremonies in Freemasonry when I was young. And
Really.
I witnessed so much of those same exact procedures, see the apron going on, and I mean, like just
Yeah.
flabbergasted because I've never seen an endowment of a Mormon. I've read accounts of it. I've heard people talk about its connections and correlations. Dr. William Schneblin is a guy who came out and talked a lot more details about that and its connections with Luciferianism and stuff like that. But I'd never heard somebody just directly share some of the points to that. But just to imagine that being explained to somebody their first time coming with a friend to a
Yeah.
service,
Oh,
you know, it's forbidden. You know,
yeah.
it's forbidden. And as your identity becomes less of the outside normal person and it becomes more bought in, that's when you're trickled down more information, you know, until your identity becomes so bonded with the cult that you are then read in to another layer of that. And then you become an enforcer of that. And you become the person that's then grooming that other ring that's a little bit
Yeah.
further out than you are. And this is psychological warfare that has been instituted against mankind
Totally.
to keep people compartmentalized from having access to the awareness that you are part of the cult, to where you're brought in so deep that your identity is so bonded with it that you cannot imagine yourself outside of that. And
Exactly.
that's where
And
people get
because it becomes
stuck.
it's such a, I mean, there's a lot of positives. There's no doubt. And that tribe, is so powerful to people to be part of something,
Mhm.
it just, yeah, it's nuts. It really is. And people can't see their lives without that involvement, you
Mhm.
know? But it was so, I mean, I've never had a more freeing experience than when I just broke free from that garbage. It was, yeah, because even though I wasn't like all in and ultra active and all that, I mean, I consistently went. I thought it was a good way to raise a family, and there's some very positives, but like you say, as you start to peel those layers back, you start to see things that aren't so good.
Mm.
But you
Wow.
sure justify it as you're going through it.
Absolutely.
So what is, with your experience and the knowledge you have of the occult, whatever, um, do you have much knowledge on the skull and bones? I mean, there's nothing positive about that, is there?
Oh, by no means.
That's what I
Yale
thought.
University has, one of the oldest, the Skull and Bones and the 322 has
Yeah,
been bound up. And if you start to really understand what the 322 is, this is an ode to the Watchers.
I'm glad
This
you brought
is,
up the 322 because I got this picture the other night. I gotta show it. Check this out.
oh man,
That's the current president,
no kidding, huh?
and he enforced the jab, and he was a world-renowned heart doctor back in his day.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
but
so
what?
he passed that on to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yes.
the 322 again is what?
These are really call signs for the fallen watchers. When you're seeing 6 6 or
Yeah.
322, these are like some of their ways of saying this is the allegiance of one of our, what you would call like the dragon courts. Like so
Okay.
pre-flood antediluvian time frame, there's these courts that were set up by these serpentine watchers and by their sons, the Nephilim, the Titans, that were the tyrants over the earth, right? Well, after the flood, the ones who started regathering that, the sons of Ham, who started regathering that information and begin to raise up the mystery religions out of that, they went and started transcribing the inscriptions that the Watchers had left upon stones because the Watchers were in prison, right? They were bound up in chains of darkness, like it says in Second Peter and Jude, that are held in captivity. Okay, well, they're in prison, but there's people that want to pick up phone calls and still be their shot callers on the earth. It's like you got the drug
Yeah,
dealer who's locked in prison and he still wants to call shots out on the streets.
that's
And so
right.
this is where the priest class became these intermediaries that used these forms of divination and necromancy to try to still communicate with these divine beings after the fact that they were no longer able to have their bodies walking around on the earth, if that makes sense. And so when Nimrod gathered together so much of what he was doing, all the people of the earth, it was to collect that information and be able to weaponize it again, to try to strategize on how do we fight back against Elohim, the creator of the heavens and the earth, and how do we set our mighty ones up in his place. And so when those languages were scattered, that was that diaspora of that secret mystery religions. And this is where that pantheon of all those gods, those principalities that are governing the nations and the sovereign territories were scattered over the earth. And this is what so many of these secret societies is a regathering of those dragon courts, is that we still imitate the hierarchical structure that the Watchers had with their progeny, and that they are the ones who carry that out. This is why George Bush and John Kerry are competing against each other in our presidential election. Meanwhile, they're classmates from Skull
Yes.
and Bones, right? And this is
Yeah.
literally this one of the oldest fraternal secret societies here out of our universities. It's based in one of our universities, you know. But these are no joke people that are seriously trained in the occult arts, you know. And so it's
It's,
something that people need to understand. The tendrils of the great whore of the Roman Catholic Church have saturated the university system, and this is
oh,
what these little offsprings of those are, and this is how they control information and control narratives, because now you have somebody who's been vetted, right,
yeah.
early on in their career, that they're going to be a yes man, you know. And this is so, why is John Kerry still on the public scene?
No
You know what I'm
kidding.
saying? Because early
Crazy.
on he literally swore oaths of allegiance similar to what you swore, where they're literally making the same oaths, and those that oath binding is exactly the fruit of the watchers. Okay. When Yeshua literally came on the earth, he said, swear not by heaven and earth, but let your yes be yes and your no be no. Like we are warned against making these declarative oaths, because that's a fruit of what the watchers did. It said they bound themselves by mutual imprecation that they were going to leave their immortal, their celestial state, their heavenly estate, and they were going to take on corporal form so they could capitulate with women. And they got addicted to that bodily, they got addicted to sex, they got lusted for the angels. And this is still something that can happen. This isn't just like a one-time thing. The immortals can still rebel at any given time, and this is why it says in the, like, Paul is warning women, hey, you should cover your hair for the sake of the angels. Like, the immortals still get lusted and can get tempted away by women and their beauty. Like, this is still this falling away. There's not just this war in heaven that happened back before Genesis, you know, and like a third of the
Yeah.
angels rebelled back then. This is something that goes on progressively throughout time. And there's major consequences when one of these immortals rebels. They can't repent, they can't come back out of it. You know what I'm saying? The blood of the Messiah does not cover their sins. And so now they're part of that kingdom of the dragon, and they are bound into it. But this is how the dragon recruits allies. This is why he's going to ultimately get a third of them to be beguiled and to be deceived, to where they join him in the war against the sons of righteousness. They go after those who guard the commandments of Yahweh and keep the testimonies of Yeshua, like it says in Revelation. This is literally who he targets. And so these societies that are where our world rulers, in a sense, come from, is because they are the priest class behind the scenes that initiates people into these societies. When they take those oaths, they get bound by a spiritual law covenant to those mighty ones, to those gods behind the scenes. That's why, for all intents and purposes, they cannot get out of it. They are bound to it. And if they try to come out of it, it's not just that people show up and threaten their lives. These
Yeah.
spiritual powers destroy them. They ravage and ruin these people. And that is there until there's a renunciation, the power of repentance and breaking free and repenting for those oaths that have been spoken. That's why I'm a huge advocate of people renouncing those oaths, systemically going through and praying off the generational curses that you yourself swore, others
Yeah.
may have sworn, your dad, your grandfather. Like this
Everybody in my
binding of
family.
iniquity is lasts for 3 or 4 generations. And
Yeah.
so that's a lot of family tree up above your head of
Big
people
time.
that came before you that could have been doing this kind of stuff out of ignorance or out of total understanding intent.
Yeah.
But by doing so, we fall under that oppression. We fall under that spell binding, and it influences our lives, and it destroys people's
Big
health,
time.
their marriage. It ruins their fidelity of being successful in life. And this
Yeah.
is where
No
so
doubt.
much of the origins of where that comes from.
It's just, yeah, it's just crazy, crazy, as you should really dig into it and look back and when you've been involved in it and look at it, it just makes no sense. But that's the thing. You're in what you believe to be the most sacred place, that's what
Mm.
you're taught. And I mean, they'll even, if you're after you go through the veil, after that endowment session, there's a big, beautiful room, called the celestial room. You can hang out there. A lot of people meditate, but say you just went through with a new uh a fiance of the male that's already, had his endowment, been on a mission or whatever. You go through there, people are excited and happy and all that. But yeah, if you're in that celestial room and you're not just whispering, they'll come up and say, hey, you need to tone it down. It's really crazy. as you just look at it, it's just nuts. But I mean, where do you see things with the churches? I mean, do you see more people waking up, or what is your experience?
Man, what a good question. You know, I think, like you shared, what happened in 2020 woke a lot of people up. It
Yeah,
really did. Because to see our churches, which are supposed to be, like you said, these sanctified places, kowtow instantly,
yeah.
instantly, by and far.
It's like
And
they
I'm
were
talking
part of
about
it.
like
Yeah, it's like most of them were
big,
part of
big
it.
churches all the way down to the little ones,
Yeah,
lockstep into that. Like there was a place that we went to. It was more like of a messianic kind of congregation because the pastor that had been there was somebody who used to go on to these programs and talk about all the same stuff we're talking about right now. He was like amazing, like incredible debater and somebody who was super passionate and zealous for the faith and everything else. But I was still on their email list. We moved away. We ended up leaving and stepping down out of there because he would tolerate having people that were still affiliated with Freemasonry as a part of it. And it got really like adopted a lot of Judaism and traditions of men and all this other stuff. And anyways, there was a lot of compromise that had worked its way in, but we sort of still getting their emails. And I remember getting their emails during back in March and April when they were really locking it down back in Colorado and
yeah,
watching him say every single thing from the public health officials, copy and pasting every single thing into there, all the way through there. And this is somebody who is such a careful advocate against so many of these tactics, who in a matter of months capitulated.
yeah,
And we got to understand the pressure behind the scenes that can get put on somebody because they are bound through like a nonprofit is serious. It's a
yeah,
serious deal when you yoke your livelihood to that. Like I've been a minister of everything I do for the past 5 years now, man. I give away everything I do. We seek the Father to meet our needs. We go to him in private and ask him to meet our needs, man. And that's what we do. But we don't have a nonprofit 501(c)(3 in
right.
any regards to this. You know what I mean? And it's because I saw that. And there was times I tried to seek out this other version that's called a 508, and I was like really trying to pursue that so that it would be a way of people that did want to give to us, that wanted to utilize the whole charitable donation side of it, that still could do that. And it was just like every time it would be hindered. And I was like, I don't think this is what you want from me. And it's because there is a mechanism that can put pressure and apply it onto people that keeps them from making those very bold and courageous moves outside of that system. I
Yeah,
know there's exceptions to that. And if those of you that have gone somewhere where they're like, my pastor is preaching the serious truth and he is relentless, and it's crazy out that that exists. They're
yeah,
just
no
very
kidding.
rare. But when I read my scriptures, he said, broad is the way that leads to destruction and narrow is the path that leads to life. Few are they that find it. That means the vast majority of people are going to be led astray on a
Yeah,
regular, continual basis. And so when we're trying to find the straight and narrow, we're going to have to find out where's the world persecuting the people that are speaking the truth. Because he said, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. If the world loves you, you're not
that's
of my
right.
kingdom. Like that's not from him. And so if
Yeah,
the world is really all about what it is that they're about, it's because they're from the same house. They're sharing it. They're drinking from the cup of demons.
it
They
really
don't
is
have
that
any
simple. The
fellowship
way
with the
you,
kingdom
yeah,
of light.
just the way you said it, it really is that simple if you just look at it like that.
Yes. And
Gotta
I
look
and I
away.
think ultimately there are people that have been drawn out of the church because of seeing those compromises, because they've watched their pastors capitulate, because they saw them lack convictions. And
Yes,
fundamentally, that's supposed to be some of the best fruit that people can see in their lives is this set apart nature by which we walk in comparison to how the nations walk. We are supposed to be a set apart people. Like we don't participate in the same things that everybody's doing on their calendar and on their holidays. We don't participate in these things. We read the scriptures and we're like, what is it that you want? How do you want to live? And so we go back to the way that the Messiah lived. And we're like, how did he walk? How did
yeah,
he do what was pleasing to his Father in heaven? How did he know his word? Like it said everything he said the Father had said. Like he only came to say what the Father said. He only came to do what the Father willed in his life. He was in total surrender to his Father. That's the ideological pursuit that we have in our life. And when we have tried to gather together with other fellowships on small scales, anytime it got beyond a couple of families, like just beyond a couple of families, like in one room, where you could actually keep an eye on everything that was going on. As soon as it got turned into programs where you have to have the children's ministry and you have to have structure that gets brought in, as soon as it grows beyond that, it should split up and go back to people's houses, go meet in parks, go meet outside. Because every time you can't really know if somebody is a wolf who has put on sheep's clothing, who has come
yes,
there to ravage the flock, unless you're in a very close, intimate relationship with the people that are there and you're trained up in knowing how to discern spirits and identify, is this person a split personality multiple who's got other back personalities that are here to curse, to covet, to steal, to defile the food? Like, you're going to have witches who are going to come in there and they're going to do all of this disgusting stuff with menstrual blood and all other disgusting manners of
Yeah.
things and ritual objects, put them in the food, and they're going to serve that to people in the buffet. And if you have no idea why, you're like, we're praying that the Father forgives the sins that may have empowered any curse spoken over this meal. Like, that's a very important prayer. Like, please, please destroy anything that's in here that's abominations. Like, because you literally have people, that's their assignment. Their
Yeah.
job is to come in and destroy where the church, where people are gathering together in power and in authority and are making a difference. They're sent on assignment there. That's how the enemy operates because you're his enemy. Like, you're
Yeah.
actually on a hit list, a kill list, a terminate list. Like, in the military, there's secret clearances, and then there's other secret clearances. Then there's this other stuff that's not on the books anymore. You know, they call it black budget
Black.
because
Yep.
it doesn't exist on paper in that sense. You get into these special access projects, and that's where you have a host of monitors of people that track, trace, and then guard those assets and people that have those clearances. Then you have an entire team of people that try to destroy those people to see if they're still secret on the good team. And they're going to try to turn them into double agents, but they're a triple agent, right? Like, this is how this whole world in espionage and counter espionage works inside our military and inside the defense contractors. That's like microcosms of what the kingdom of darkness has been setting up for millennia. Like, you have people that don't, you have immortals that never sleep who wage a war against you day and night. Like, you better understand the tactics of your enemy. Like, you're supposed to be not ignorant of the schemes of the devil for a reason, because you're going to get
Yeah.
taken captive by him to do his desire if you're not. 100% guarantee. And so if you're ignorant of these things and you're like, we want to do a church thing, you're going to get eaten alive. You're going to see pastors fall into adultery. You're going to see people dying
Yep.
in car accidents. You're going to see lives ruined, sexual abuse of children taking place because they're going to infiltrate the children's ministry. Like, this is what they do. I just had a phone call with a guy and spent hours talking to him who his family, man, his family had this, like a Christian, camp for children and stuff like that. Well, this youth pastor moved in and he got the most disturbed, disgusting feeling about this guy from the beginning. It was like, something is super off here. I don't know what it is, but this guy should not be anywhere around us, around these children in any circumstances. For 2 years, he'd been screaming and warning everybody, this guy, something is off with this guy. I know this guy's a predator. I can't prove it. He even confronted the guy directly. And it's like, I know you are a predator. I know that you
Wow.
are. You have a chance right now. Confess it and tell me, and he's like, no, there's nothing there, until his little brother comes forward and is like, yeah, he's been sexually raping me, pervert raping him. You know what
Gosh.
I'm saying? This is the youth pastor, has been doing this for years, right? And then how does the church respond? To attack the victim. You know what I'm
Dude.
saying? Like,
Dude.
they have the
Oh,
opportunity
this makes
to
me
to
so
no,
pissed
but
off.
that's when the PR gets brought in. That's when
Dude.
people that are managing the public relations are like, okay, we're going to minimize. This is what they do. They minimize the actual extremity of sexual perversion if took place. We're going to talk about it like molestation, or we're going to talk about it like inappropriate touching or inappropriately acted inappropriately. That's how we're going to call it. We're going to say he acted inappropriately or had some inappropriate interactions with one child, none
Yeah.
other, right?
Yeah.
One young man. Let's call him a young man. Let's not call him a child. Like, this is literally
Exactly.
the spin doctors and how
Oh,
they
dude, the Mormon
manipulate this
church,
entire story.
masters at this. They
And this
cover
is
up
this
sex
is
abuse like you can believe.
yes,
I just
that's
listened to a
dude.
podcast a few weeks ago. The girl got paid off. Her own dad was abusing her, you know, proves it and everything. And they shut down any court action and anything, paid her off 300K. The guy says in the video that is taped of him, the representative of the church speaking to the victim, he has been authorized to pay 300,000. And then all the bishop, all the clergy is taught if anyone comes, either a victim or anyone comes to confess, never to call the police, but to call the 800 number at Kirk and McConkie, the big Salt Lake law firm. They're a specific 800 number for the church, and they start dealing with it. And it's like you say, the victims are the ones they don't get any help. They don't get, any offer counseling to be paid for to help them in any way. It's to shut them up and to cover up. It
Yes.
pisses me off to no end because it happened
Yes.
all the time.
You bet. And this is literally what John 3, everyone's all about John 3:16, which is a
Yep.
powerful, amazing passage. But you keep reading in that. This is one of my favorite chapters in the entire thing. And this is why it is the way it is. What you're experiencing here is, and this is the judgment that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their works were wicked. For everyone who is practicing evil matters hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But the one doing the truth comes to the light, so that his works are clearly seen that they have been wrought in Elohim. That's the fundamental crux of it, is that these people have been practicing evil.
Yep.
Practicing. Think about this, man. Honing a methodology to commit evil. And those closet sins, those closet compromises, brand them internally with shame. They bind them with shame.
Oh yeah.
And then they cannot allow anybody else to know the truth behind the scenes, behind the curtains, behind the veil of what's actually here. The insidious nature of what's taking place is this. Like, this is why one of the videos on my channel is called Why We Left Parable of the Vineyard, because there was deep, horrific amounts of systemic abuse happening behind the scenes that nobody wanted to talk about. And when it was brought forward, minimize it as much as we can, try to forgive everybody that was involved and just move on. And like, this was just, it was disgusting to watch the amount of compromise infect a bunch of people who are awake to all this stuff, frontline leaders in this whole awake Christian Torah
Yeah.
movement compromise systemically. But that's because there's fruits at the roots of it. There's deep compromise that's been going on for years behind the scenes. That already sexual immorality and sexual adultery and rape and incest have been covered up for years. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, if we start peeling this onion back, it gets a lot worse. So elders step down, elders step down, elders step down, elders step down. And they're like, yeah, but the main guy keeps getting exalted, keeps getting
Yeah.
washed and exalted. And you're like, it was disgusting to watch the victims get railroaded, and everyone instead turned their attention to attack the messengers and attack those who came out against. It's just like, I've seen this happen in cults for generation now of my life, and I'm like, it's the same methodology, because that is it. They're practicing evil. They're
Yeah.
practicing evil, and they don't want to come to the light because they know your works are going to be exposed when they come there. And they're every time somebody tries to cover up those skeletons in their closet, they're like, okay, we don't want to talk about this. And then they attack the victims because what's behind that closet is way worse.
Yeah. Jeez. It's just fascinating, but sad at the same time. Where do you see it, things going in 2024, not only just in the churches, but on this planet?
Man, what a big question.
It's a big
You
one.
know,
'Cause-
it's a, there's one side of me that always hopes and holds out for this, the great revelation, you know,
yeah.
like that truly everything they've done in secret gets revealed. That is always
Yeah.
on one side of it. That is always one of my deepest hopes and prayers, is that what they've done in darkness will be brought to the light. That everything they've done in secret and spoken in secret would be shouted from the rooftops. And what they thought that no man saw, that no woman saw, that would all be played continually in the fronts of the faces and the eyes of mankind. I always long for that. Every year I pray and long and desire that what people have done in order to destroy and defile and compromise all of this worldly system that we have seen, that's been built on the blood of the innocents, that would come out and testify against them, that more and more people, an endless stream of people, would come forward with boldness and courage to speak the truth about what's taking place in their life and tell the family secrets that have been
Yeah.
bound up in this. Because we're talking about the church on one side of it. This is just systemically disgusting inside families. The family
Yes.
secrets that keep people bound up allow the system of shame to continue to rule over and keep the eyes of men blind, keep them deaf and dumb and unable to hear the gospel of the kingdom and come to the freedom and the deliverance that they have. I think in many ways we're looking at the potentials for an incredible, just continual destruction of people's peace and continuity of the soundness of integrity for their freedoms and their self-sovereignty in any capacity, when it comes to ways that they're trying to orchestrate, whether it's the banking side of this and try to bring about,
Yeah.
financial cyber attacks and banking crisis, to usher in different digital backed currencies and all the rest of it. I do think that these are very likely very near steps that are coming pounded down our doors, that this is
Yeah.
whether it's this year or the next, these are some strong inevitabilities of what it is that they're doing. I was trying to explain to my wife the social credit score system in China and
Yeah.
how that operates in government. And I was just sharing with her videos and explaining this to her. And she just could not believe how this gets facilitated so quickly in so
Yeah.
many different places. And I'm trying to explain to her like why we're trying to raise our children up to be able to navigate a society like this, how to navigate it. Like my website has been flagged as potentially harmful or dangerous content. And so all these people are sending me screenshots after the new year started of their ISPs, their internet service providers blocking my website, right?
Dude, you
Blocking
know what?
websites.
That's crazy
And
because yours came up today, but what you're talking about, I had a guy I was talking to yesterday that's coming on the podcast, and I can't remember his domain for sure, but that's what was happening when I was trying to go to it yesterday. It was warning me, that this site's, you know, going to try to do all this malware phishing and all this crazy stuff, something like Truth Seeker or something like that, So it's just, it's crazy. But yeah, you're right. I think 2024, 2025, we're going to have a pretty clear picture of which way things are going to go in
yeah,
this war.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that the pressing and I mean, there is a steadfast, relentless drive to try to get people geared up for a civil war, to gear
Yes,
them up politically, emotionally,
they want it.
psychologically, mentally, militaristically towards a civil war. They are
Absolutely.
fomenting that very viscerally and they're finding effective strategies at doing that. And so these are some of those like genuine things that are continually on the radar, And so I think
Yeah,
every one of us has an absolute duty to do our utmost to understand how do we navigate recruiting others towards the kingdom of righteousness more than ever. Like that's how we most effectively counter those tactics and those schemes
right.
of falsehood and lies and I mean the veil that is being put over the eyes of people, and like the way that we can combat that for me is we're huge into trying to advocate the natural ways of living in every chance that we can, whether that's the food that we eat, the water that we drink, the clothes that we wear, unplugging ourselves from the systematized toxins that are being perpetually put upon us to give people the clarity of thought so they can make good decisions, so they have
Yes,
freedom from the brain fog, for the freedom from the exhaustion and the fatigue and the just dreariness that is being perpetually pumped into their bodies, to give them the ability to make good decisions, to be able to read the word for themselves, to be able to arm themselves up with information so they can make wise and informed decisions, so that they're not taken captive by these deceivers, scared into complying, scared into a universal basic income, scared into a form of volunteering your entire identity to go into a digital format so that if you want to still fly, like my wife and I tried to fly, man, a couple months ago. And we afterwards were like, we are so they separated my wife from us at one point and we're like, your name is not on the same thing. And it was just this like realization. I'm like, I've got twin babies who are like dependent on mom,
yeah,
like infants. You know what I'm saying? And they just separated my wife from me. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing in subjecting myself to this
crazy.
system where,
Yeah,
like, if I want to travel, like, we loaded up our car, we're like, we'll drive 20 hours instead next time
no
because
kidding.
they treat you like you are the absolute monster. Period. I'm like, you're gonna strip search me and body grope me and all the rest of it because I'm not gonna submit to your naked body scanners that are worse than a bunch of MRIs, And it's like they
Exactly.
searched every single item of clothes. I mean, they took every single thing out of our bag, our baby bags, diaper. I mean, everything. 45 minutes of this security search
Ridiculous.
because we opted
Yeah.
out. It was like a spectacle, right? And you realize like these shaming tactics. I'm like,
Yep.
this is something that you realize has been effectively designed now for decades. We're 2 decades into what it's like for the
Decades is still
TSA,
going on.
this private organization in a sense, to come in and
Yeah.
and grope people, and just
Yep.
make them dehumanized. And I'm like, we must understand how to navigate and travel without complying. This is important
Yep.
skills for us to learn. Like we need to learn how to build our lifestyle around that and understanding that flying may never be an option for you ever again. And that's
Yeah.
something that may be your reality. Like, have you ever considered trains? Have you understood like there's other forms of travel that other countries have utilized? That's why I encourage people to study and read underground church movement books. How does the underground church operate in other countries? One of my favorites is called The Insanity of God. And that is absolutely foundational for those that are trying to get ahead of how to navigate meeting with other brothers and sisters in a place in a society where it's illegal. You know what I'm saying? Where you are the persecuted ones, like
Yeah.
Tortured for Christ is one of my absolute favorites by Richard Wurmbrand. Like, critical book for people to read and understand what it's like to grow up in an oppressed society and then in a persecutory society. It's good for the church in that sense. It's good for believers to suffer persecution because when you attack believers overtly, face to face, we multiply every single
Yeah.
time. Every single time. It's reality. Like, it's an unstoppable reality. All the way back to the days of Israel in Egypt. Man, the more they persecuted them, the more they multiplied. They're like, what the heck? So this is
Yeah.
why the Jesuits and these other secret societies infiltrate, and they like use subterfuge, and they're like, okay, well, we'll befriend them instead. Like, Andrew Carnegie is like, I'm gonna I know I'm a big atheist and all the rest of that, but I'm going to send an organ to every church in America as a gift. And they'll just love that, like, what a nice gesture, and like, hey, if you'd be consider, one or two of these, you know, people to be on your board of directors, why don't you just consider to have them come in and you just watch this slow infiltration through charity, befriending them? It's like, we'll befriend them. The people that had been coming at us and trying to kill us and cut our throats and hang us and burn us alive and burn us with our Bibles on our necks are instead like, why don't we all just be friends again? Like, put all those like disagreements behind us. Let's join the universal church. Let us go ahead and compromise and just go ahead and be a part of each other's. We're really brothers in the faith, right? We all basically believe similar things, and
Yeah.
this just degradation of convictions that has been so insidiously sown. Those are far more dangerous threats, real threats, than anything that they can try to bring about, whether it's, power outages and scarcity and
Yeah.
lack and all these other forms of fear that they're trying to pummel down our throats all the time, day and night. Like, this is why the words of the book of John are so powerful, and the book of Matthew. Like, our Messiah spoke profound and powerful words to reassure us of understanding he is the great provider. And if we can go to him and seek him daily and deliberately, that he can clothe us with wisdom from on high to be able to know what our adversaries are going to do ahead of the time so that we're not ignorant of the devil's schemes and we can see danger coming and prepare likewise.
Yeah. That's the key right there. Is this it is. It's confusing that, the fog of war is real, and best thing you can do that I've found is try to just, you know, improve your relationship with Savior and improve that discernment because we need it more now than ever, and it's tough. It's frustrating at times, but
Absolutely.
being aware, I'm just grateful to be aware and be able to have conversations with people like you that help me see things that I'm not seeing that really help me and to just have people that have different experiences that we can all talk and share with people that want to listen that hopefully makes an impact on their lives because I think we outnumber these evil beings by quite a lot, and if we could all just unite and focus on love and unity, we could really make an impact, I believe. And that's what this is all about to me.
That's right, man. Absolutely. That's why we got to try to seek to raise up the remnant army. This is
Bingo.
people that know our God, that know
Yeah.
him intimately. This is what we need. We need to have an intimate relationship with him so we understand our identity is found in him and so that we can walk in his authority on this earth. We can walk in the same mind of the Messiah. He's like, arm yourself with the mind of Christ. It's a
Yeah.
serious thing. It's a literal weapon of warfare. It's a way that we can contend against the dragon, to take up the shield of faith, to extinguish those javelins, missiles that are being
Yeah.
fired at us, directed at us. And I mean, they're custom catered to destroy us personally, individually. Weapons that were made for you to
Yeah.
destroy you have been sent out all the time. And so arming yourself with that shield of faith is critical so that you are not deceived.
Yeah. Man, Nathan, this has been great as usual. I appreciate your time. And is there anything else you want to discuss before we wrap things up?
No, I really appreciate you sharing with me the realities of what it was like to go through that experience for you, and I think you gave an incredible insight to people, especially those that I'll share this with, who have never even considered what it's like to go through that. The Crucible Project was its own version of that is
Sure.
infiltrating and working its way through non-denominational Christianity, and there's these fraternal organizations are always seeking ways to steal, kill, and destroy and to get people ensnared under this spiritual slumber, this technological spiritual seduction that is trying to devour the hearts and the souls of mankind. But you know what? Your power of of your testimony is what can help set so many other captives free. Because you know what?
Yeah.
This, we never know who it is that's going to hear these things. This is out there now for good. And we have an
Yeah.
opportunity. It says the enemy, the dragon, that devil of old is defeated by the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and not loving our lives when faced with death. So thank you so much for sharing what you did tonight. It's really a pleasure to be able to come on here and talk with you again, Steve.
Oh, you bet. Let me tell you one other quick story that you might find interesting. It plays into that whole shame game, right?
Mm.
So, we're taught that every worthy young man should go on a mission, right? And that has been reemphasized recently over the last year or two, where they had backed off it quite a bit over the last several years. Um, but anyway, so when I went on my mission, it was 1986, and I went to South Carolina. I go to the MTC, Mission Training Center for 3 weeks prior to going out into the field, the mission that you've been called to. And I can see literally the house that I grew up in from my classroom at the MTC. I was miserable. I went only because I didn't really want to. I went because I was raised that that's what you do. And so I figured I'm going to do it. I might as well just do it to go get it over with. Well, I get to South Carolina where I was called on New Year's Eve. And I won't get into all the details of that. It's kind of interesting, but kind of stupid at the same time. Because I had a companion that just didn't follow the rules. And it's just like, man, if I'm going to be doing all the bullshit, then I might as well be home with people I like. Well, I started having these gut aches, and every morning and really painful and lose my appetite on and off. So I started writing home, talked to my parents that something's not right, man. And I got to the point where I believed I should go home. And, because my parents believed what they believed, it got to the point where my father wrote me a letter and said, well, you'll know what it's like if you come home to pay for your own this, your own that, and things like that. And I had a pretty serious girlfriend when I left and got letters from her father telling me that I would be worthy of her, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they continued on. And my dad finally got to the point, and I'm only about 3 months out there. And I just knew something was wrong, man. Like I would lost weight. I went out soaking wet like a buck 54. And by the time I got to the end of the story, I'll tell real quick. I weighed 125 pounds in
Wow.
3.5 months. And I was kind of jaundicey looking. But my dad got to the point where he said, well, if you stay until April, because that was the next general conference, like the first week of April every year is one of their semi-annual conferences in October and April. He just believed that I would hear something that would be so powerful that it would just change everything for me, right? Now, he didn't understand the weight loss or didn't know what I looked like or anything like that because, I'm not seeing it really myself because it's happening, even though it's
Mhm.
3 months, pretty fast, lose 30 pounds. But anyway, so it was like about March 23rd, I believe. So I'm a couple of weeks away. At this point, I knew I was going home and I knew it was right for me, you know, but that didn't compute with anybody, even, any members, anybody, parents, nobody, because that just doesn't make sense. If you're doing the Lord's work, why would that happen? Right. That's the way they believe.
Mm.
One day I was just so damn depressed at this point that my companion's in getting ready, it's in the bathroom showering. So I go in the kitchen and I just grabbed the aspirin bottle. I'm not thinking anything. I just remembered looking back, I just did it and took a handful of aspirin because I just wanted to be sick. I wanted to sleep, not die. I wanted to sleep, be, so depressed. That's all you want to do. And because I knew I was going home, but until that conference came, it wasn't okay. Right. So I didn't tell my companion. I go shower after we go on our bikes and go see some people that I baptized. And now my ears are ringing like crazy. And a couple hours passed and we're heading back to go to lunch back to our apartment. And I'm driving my bike behind my companion and I'm starting to lose it. Like, I don't know what you call it, nervous breakdown, whatever, mental breakdown, I don't know. But got into our apartments and I went straight into my bed, into the bedroom. He went into the kitchen and I just wanted to rage. Like I just laid on my bed, grabbed both sides because I was falling apart.
Mm.
And he comes in about 10 minutes later and asked me what's up. And I finally told him what I did. And, I probably was crying at that point before he even came in. And so he had me, so much time passed, but he he was doing what he thought was right. Nothing was wrong with it. He was trying to help me, obviously. Had me drink much soapy water, thinking I could throw this up, but it's already, metabolized into my blood big time. It's interesting. I spoke to that guy in a message just a few weeks back. He was a great guy. Anyway, I go to the hospital and they're probing me and saying I should have been in toxic shock, already and blah, blah, blah. So my dad obviously gets word through the mission president stuff, and he flies out the next morning and sees me. And as soon as he saw me, he started crying
Mm.
because he knew how wrong he had been just by the look of what I looked like. And I still walking down the airport the next day after he was out. I think we spent one night before we get a flight out. My mission president still telling me, you should stay here, Elder Cloward, and I'll put you in the office. You can work in the office and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, still not knowing what's wrong with me, right? But 3 nights after I'm home, I'm eating dinner and my appetite just disappeared like that. My gut started killing me. And my mom took me over and I'm not released yet. I'm still on an honorable medical release. They're still all thinking that, man, hopefully he'll go back, right? Which there's no chance at that point with where I was at, period. And so I go see my mom's cousin who was a physician, and he says, "Oh, you better get him to the ER. It looks like he's got appendicitis." And so I go in for surgery, which they thought was going to be appendicitis, which it still was that, but I was in there for 2.5 hours. It's supposed to be like a 20-minute surgery back in the 87. And they cut out 6 inches of my small bowel, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And that's where my addiction started to opiates that lasted 14 years. But I remember a few weeks later, after I was home, my dad was a BYU campus bishop at one time, and one of his, um, you know, young adult BYU student members was in town and seeing him, and this is probably 20 years after that. He was a bishop, and after that guy left, my dad came and talked to me, and he was telling me that when I can't remember the guy's name, I can picture him, but he said, "Yeah, when so and so saw you," because I guess I was coming down the stairs when he was in the living room with my dad, just chatting, and he said, he's supposed to go back on that mission. Do you understand how many people are not, how many lives are going to be ruined because he is the only person that would have the ability to touch specific people? Now, is that just craziest? And, that messed me up a little bit from, a little bit, but it's like, talk about manipulation. And it's just, I don't know why I told that story really, but just it shows how deep it gets.
Mhm.
And whether it's the Mormon church or any other cult, um, you know, I think we just need to be willing to have an open mind if we're involved in anything that we think is pure, and
Mhm.
ask ourselves and think for ourselves and pray and ask the Lord to help you see truth.
Mhm.
I guess that's probably the reason, I guess, because there's so many people that are believe they're doing the right thing, believe they're involved in something truly righteous. But that deception is Satan and his minions are so clever.
That's right. Wow. What I mean, on one side, a horrible tragedy, but a deliverance from a very different life and future, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
that it's changed your life so drastically. But even as you're sharing that, to think about how many people are caught up in something that they don't recognize has
Yeah.
this same mentality where people are masters of manipulation
Yeah.
behind the scenes who have got them to buy in to an ideological pursuit that makes them part of a collective, that has
Yeah.
stripped them of their individuality and has made them to where they cannot be anything other than a part of that. And
Right.
so what a powerful story to get to hear how you have gotten to where you are. I'm so thankful that you have, even though you endured great suffering through the addiction and all of the things that came from that afterwards, and
Oh,
the Father has used that and orchestrated so much of that to bring true restoration to you and giving you your identity back and the freedom of thought. And that is one of the greatest gifts that any of us can ever have, is to be restored to the soundness of mind, to be able to think and make our own decisions. It is a true gift Free will is the greatest gift that he ever could have given us, you know, and
That's
for
right.
anybody to come along and try to orchestrate a way to engineer that out of our hands and into theirs is absolute evil. That's the fruit of the fallen ones. That is the fruit of the tyrants, is to not allow people the freedom to choose, to make wise and informed decisions. But this is why we wage these wars. This is why you're doing this. What you're doing, Steve, is to try to make sure people have access to the truth while we still can.
Bingo. That's it. I tried to ignore it for a long time, but it just kept pushing me. And if we can just tell one person, man, that makes a difference.
Mhm.
And I believe it'll be a lot more than that. But if it was just one, it's worth it.
That's right.
Even for all the BS that I put up with, all the trolls, but it's still worth it. So, but man, thank you so much, Nathan. Hope we can do this again. And you're just a wealth of knowledge, and just you got an energy of light that comes off you, and I just appreciate the time chatting and interacting with you.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm really glad to be here with you as well. I hope you have a great night.
You too. Talk to you later.
Talk to you
Take
soon.
care.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow, towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. This is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work.
The new MyPillow towels are exclusively made with 100% USA combed cotton with proprietary technology and with maximum absorbency. They dry you faster and are guaranteed to work.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow. And to thank you for all your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you get my dog beds for as low as $19.99, or for a limited time, you can get my 6-piece towel sets, regularly $109.99, now only $39.99. The lowest price ever with your promo code.